Here's one terrain project you don't want to miss. I'm going to be showing you how I turned this into this. What's up, nerds? Welcome back to Big Nerds Wargaming. My name is Sam, and today we're going to be doing a terrain crafting project, and I'm going to be using some of this STC Hab bunker terrain. Now, I got all of this on eBay in a really good lot deal, and I just couldn't pass it up. So I picked it up a while ago, and I've been kind of sitting on it for a while. Not sure what I want to do with it, if I want to just paint them up and add to the ones that I already have, because I already have this Nachman set, but you can always use more terrain. I got thinking, and I was looking at the Warhammer Plus battle reports, and they always have really cool terrain, and I think it'd be fun to try to replicate some of their terrain, especially the way they incorporate the bunkers into big rock formations and mountainsides, or like hidden mountain bases. I think that'd be really cool and really fun to make. So we're gonna try to do that today using these bits here. And I'm also gonna be 3D printing some stuff and introducing that as well. I'm gonna be making a few pieces, and hopefully we'll have a whole battlefield worth of terrain that will be kind of like frontier, or maybe perhaps a mining world, or perhaps a hidden base deep inside some rock faces and cliffs. So we're gonna see where this goes. I'm really excited, but let's get started. The first thing I need to do is open up this terrain and clip everything from the sprue, and then we're gonna figure out how we wanna build this and how we're gonna throw it all together. Let's get cracking. So first things first, I had to go through and clip everything off the sprue. Here's a time-lapse footage of that. It took a lot longer than I thought it would, especially trying to clip them cleanly so that we didn't have any extra mold lines or flash. And then I assembled the antenna towers along with the satellite dishes in preparation for piecing together the rest of the terrain pieces. And with all the terrain pieces clipped and assembled that I'm going to use, it's time to start figuring out the layouts to use for each of the terrain pieces themselves. In addition to the Games Workshop pieces, I printed up some Mechanicus-styled walkways and supports. These are all created by Fabricators Lair, which I'll put a link in the description. He's got some great designs. So my primary building materials is going to be MDF hardboard, some polystyrene foam, and then to shape that, I'm going to be using a hot wire cutter. I've been hoarding this foam for a while, and I'm glad I did, because I ended up using quite a bit of it. And this is my first time using a hot wire cutter, so hopefully it's as easy as it looks. So I thought I'd start with something simple, with some 2 stacked bunkers and a rock face. So I just start by drawing a footprint of how big I want the piece to be, and then kind of marking where the bunker goes, and then start cutting some foam to shape the initial rock face. So having never done anything like this before, I'm kind of making it up as I go, but I'm learning quite a bit with each piece I make and refining my process as I go along. So after I get a rough cutout shape of the foam, I have to also cut the MDF board. I use a jigsaw for this, just cutting along the line that I marked with the Sharpie. Then I secure the foam to the board with some PVA glue, along with gluing in the bunkers. And then I start taking some random foam cuts and using some cocktail skewers to help secure them in place, and just start filling in the gaps and adding some roof to the bunkers. I'm kind of going for a random shape here, as this is random rock, and I'll be filling this all in with putty and modeling compound later. For this other piece of terrain, I'm going for something a little bit more simple, so I'm going to be going with more square-shaped cuts. I want to have a flat platform on top so that it's more playable and that the models can climb to the top of the hill. I'm going to be using some rock plaster molds, and they're just going to stick to the sides of the foam to create that rocky texture for the most part, so I don't have to worry too much about the foam being a natural rocky shape. But using this hot wire cutter, it sure makes things easy. It cuts like butter. So much like the first piece, I then take the wire cutter and shave off the hard edges and kind of sculpt the rock a little bit to give it some definition and shape. And then I glue on some offcut pieces to help give it a more natural organic shape. I then take the antenna tower and a little hatch, and I decided that it'd be kind of cool to put that on top so they can go in through the bunker, climb up the hatch, and get to the antenna. So after completing a structure for 2 pieces, I've learned a few things already that I can apply to my future pieces, so it's time to start making some more. I created 2 more pieces. There's actually a third not on camera here, but I have some of my rock face was using some of my platforms that I 3D printed along with some doors. Now some of these doors are actually for boarding actions terrain, but I thought it'd be fun to put another comms tower and a bunker on top with a satellite dish on top, with a door of course to get inside, and another platform for verticality. Next, I had to mix up some rock plaster molds with some hydrocoal plaster. This process took a while because I only have these 3 molds here and I needed quite a bit of rocks. But this stuff sets in about 20 minutes, but it takes quite a while for it to fully dry out. And one trick you can use is to apply some soapy water to the mold before you pour it in to help it release easier. And a pro tip, you can also add some black paint to your plaster so that the rocks come out gray. The benefit to this is if it chips in the future, it'll be gray underneath instead of white. Next comes to plastering, so I fill in the gaps with some aluminum foil on this piece because it's got some really big ones. And then I get my rock plaster molds that I have been molding over the past few days. And I mix up some Sculptamold modeling compound. This is my first time using real Sculptamold. I had made my own in the past with plaster of Paris and some shredded up egg cartons, but this stuff works much better. So I go around the piece, fill in all the gaps with the Sculptamold, and I also use the Sculptamold to secure the rock pieces to the sides of the foam. Another pro tip, you can also mix in black paint with your Sculptamold plaster just like the rock molds, which I do for these other pieces. As you can see, it is very, very messy, and your working time isn't very long. I was tempted and I mixed a huge batch, and half of it had to get thrown away because it had already hardened before I got around to using it. So work in small batches and just have some patience. And while the plaster is wet, I secure these tubes and pipes and walkways into the rock formations. Next up came basing. I just went around with some PVA glue on all the areas as well as on some spots in the bunkers and filled it all in with sand. Now this is just cheap construction sand. You can get a 20-pound bag for $5 at any home improvement or construction store. It's great for basing. Now it's important to let everything fully dry after this step, so the plaster will be cool and wet to the touch for up to a few days for some people. I was able to speed up the process by using a dehumidifier and creating a plastic tent. So I put it on continuous full blast and it dried out everything overnight, and I left it for about a day and a half total, and it was all ready to go. Next is prime time. So I went around and primed everything black. Now there is foam underneath, so you have to be careful to spray at least 12 to 15 inches away, otherwise the accelerant or the propellant from the paint can will melt the foam. I actually ran into this issue on these first 2 pieces, but luckily there's enough plaster in place to keep everything together and it didn't collapse on me. And then I do a zenithal top-down prime with some gray. And with everything all primed up, we are ready to do some real painting. For the rocks, I take a big brush and some cheap green craft paint mixed with some black to darken it up, and I just go around and stipple all the rocks with some green. This will add some natural tones to the rocks and make them look less gray and boring. I then go around with a dark brown mixture and do the same thing. I then go over all the industrial walkways and make sure they are primed black. For the bunkers themselves, I just go around with some red paint. I'm using some Army Painter air paints, and I thin them out so I can get a lot of bang for my buck. And I use my airbrush and just go around and quickly paint everything red. And then I add in some metallic paints. This is rough iron on some of these bunkers for the roofs, as well as some metal details. And then I just use a silver metallic paint for the other metal details on the other pieces. And then the ground, I just go over with some brown paint. This is again that cheap acrylic craft paint, and get everything just a nice solid brown coat. The next step is a black wash. So using some craft paint and some soapy water, I dilute it down until it gets to a nice runny wash consistency. And then I just slowly go over everything. Now it's going to come out really dark, and that's okay because we want to darken this all up quite a bit. So I just carefully coat everything with this black wash until everything is fully covered. I then speed dry this in my dehumidifier tent setup, which works out great. Otherwise, you could just leave this sit overnight and it'll be good to go. Coming back to the industrial walkways, I do a dry brush of a medium brown, so this is Mornfang brown. I'm going for a rusty, corroded metal look. So I just carefully go around all the smokestacks and the walkways and the pillars holding up the walkways on this piece here, as well as the other two pieces. Once that's dry, I go around with a actual dry brush application of Runelord brass. Between the brass and the brown dry brush from before, you get a great dirty rusty metal iron look. After the brass, I use Neolic oxide and go around all the spots where there are bolts and screws, as well as some other random touches here and there to make the metal look a little corroded. Lastly, I take Rakarth flesh and I stipple on some areas where there would be some paint. And the benefit to stippling here is you get some natural weathering out of your paint job, making it look like the paint's been chipping away over time as it's been exposed to the elements. Next, for the bunkers, I go back and dry brush red over the walls just to lighten them up a little bit and bring them back from that dark wash. And then I dry brush over the rocks with a light gray. This again is cheap acrylic craft paint, but it's something along the lines of Administratum gray. This is my favorite part because it really brings the whole piece to life and it looks like it's finally done. And then lastly, I go over the ground as well with this gray dry brush just to kind of tie it together. I find that gray or neutral bases tend to work with pretty much any battle mat. And with this, we are ready for a grand reveal. Well, there you have it. Warhammer World quality terrain at home. A real Frontiers base. If you like this video, let me know what you think. Also, if you like what we do here on the channel, subscribe. All right, well, I'm gonna leave you with some cool action shots.